Welcome back to the Word for the Valley podcast, and this is part 2 of our episode. Now, as Jesus closes this section of parables, he reminds us that the truths of God never change, but they're always fresh. The same gospel that transformed lives centuries ago still transforms hearts today. And so we don't need new truths, we need the old truths made new, lived out, rediscovered, and applied in the moments we face right now. Let's listen in with Pastor Mike at verse 51 as we explore how timeless truth stays alive in a changing world.
Now, verse 51, Jesus said to them, "Have you understood all these things?" And they said to him, "Sure." This is how you know they didn't, by the way. Their answer is just so flippant and so easy. But it seems as if they're kind of tired of asking questions or getting more details, which they did already twice in this teaching. So just I think we get it and move along from there. You guys understand this? Yeah, sure we do. Well, then Jesus says in verse 52, then he said to them, "Well, therefore, if you get this," he says, "every scribe instructed concerning the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings out of his treasure things new and old." Now, scribes during Jesus' time were individuals, primarily their job was to write the scriptures down, right? They didn't have printing presses. They didn't have a lot of the mechanisms to be able to, get Bibles and Bible translations out. So they would handwrite these things. In so doing, they became scholars on the text. One of the best ways, Julie does this a lot, one of the best ways at memorizing scriptures, Bible verses and whatnot, is just to write them down a bunch of times. Just by your own hand. Write them down, write them down, write them down, write them down. And then before long, they're kind of stuck in your head. There's a retention and a memory that is gained by writing, taking notes and putting this down on paper, right? Just the act of it itself is good, right? So the scribe, he would become familiar with the things of the scriptures. And remarkably, Jesus is saying here, listen, as long as this goes on, there are going to be things new and things old that the scribe needs to bring out of his storehouse. Remarkably, the things old, the truths of the scriptures and the logos of God, they don't change. They don't change. I get a little bit bothered by individuals who seem to be bored with the great old truths of the scriptures. So bored, in fact, that they need to read somebody else's book, like an Osteen or whatever, kind of, because they need it. They need something new. They need something exciting. They need something fresh. They need something novel. They want to, they kind of the Bible. What's the Bible? It's just the Bible, right? We want somebody that can, be dynamic and exciting and these kinds of things. And it concerns me for this, is that you can never get better than the great old truths of the gospel. That Jesus Christ, in fact, died for sinners. He died and he covered their sin in his blood to redeem those who, if they are willing to confess their sins and believe on Jesus, and he's willing to save them and make them his own. You don't get any better than the gospel. You don't get any better than the basic truths of the scriptures. That God loves us, that God made us, that he has a plan for us, that there is a heavenly home. You don't get any better than the basic truths of the scriptures. But the remarkable thing then, as you go along, is that there's always a freshness and a newness, even to the old truths. I forget who it was that said it. We don't need new truths. We need the old truths made new. We're not looking for something different or exciting or new. It has never been said before, right? Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. Somebody comes up with a great new novel idea. It's always remarkable in philosophy. Everything cycles back around. Yeah, like subjectivism got made up, like that's a new thing, right? And now we're postmodern. We're not even modern anymore. We're like postmodern now, and we're like in this new era, which is the same old era that we've been in the past, but just keep cycling around in different words. We're goofy, right? You do realize like every pop song is an old pop song with just a different beat or a different dancer or a different flair, right? It's all the same. It's all the same jazz. It's all the same stuff, right? There's nothing new to it, right? But we like to feel like we're going to get to the cutting edge. We're going to be the ones that find the new thing. When what we're actually looking for is we're looking for a current application of the old truth, which in that setting then becomes completely new, which is the rhema of God. It's the old truths, but it's the old truths applied in the right way. It's the old truths lived out in 2022. It's the Bible fleshed, which has never happened in my life like this before because I haven't done today before. So for me, it's completely new. And here what Jesus is saying here to describe is, listen, there has to be this constant tension in your life in regards to your teaching and in regards to your living, that the old truths don't get lost, but they keep being lived out and fleshed out in the current day-to-day so they become new in your life as well. Nobody just wants old information, right? I love reading old Bible teachers. I can only do like Vernon McGee for so long, or, even like an old Chuck Smith teaching from back in the 60s or 70s or 80s or whatever. Like, you listen to it, you're like, the stories are old, the applications are old, the thing, and it's fine, the content, you get the rhema, or you get the logos out of it, you get the truth out of it, but you're like, there's a reason why he kept teaching the Bible, because it needed to be freshened up as you moved into the 2000s. It needed new application. It needed new expressions. It needed new verbiage. That has to keep going in all of our lives. If we're going to keep growing, your roots are sunk in the old, the truths, the Bible, the gospel, but it keeps being fleshed out in the new. Because I promise you, if the Lord endures one more day, that tomorrow is going to offer challenges that you've never experienced before, and you're going to need a new expression of the old truths to be able to address that when you get there. No scribe, no teacher, and no Christian gets done in their work, in their study, in their understanding, in their growth, right? I've taught through the Bible, 4 times, 3 times, not just here at Calvary, but in other places. And I have probably studied, I think, when I looked at it, at least in the New Testament, I've studied every book of the Bible with a study at least 15 times. Like with a commentator or a teacher or something where I've studied it, and I've read it through multiple more times than that. I don't ever get to a passage and be like, oh, I got that. I got it. I got it. I know that. I've lived that out perfectly for the last 10 years. Nobody, just, of course, I got it. I've come to passages that I'm familiar with, that I've used before, that I've taught before, that I've understood before. But I also want to say, Lord, what do you have for tomorrow? What do you have for Sunday? If we didn't need any new, then I would just put Chuck Smith up on here, and we would just watch Chuck Smith or Joe Foach teach the same passages over and over again, and we would be all good. But we need it fleshed out in our own lives. It has to take on expression for ourselves. Because it's going to look different here. It's going to look different now than maybe it did yesterday, or that it does in Southern California, or even in Philadelphia. It has to look like the way the Lord wants it to look like through our lives, which is going to require a bit of a newness. And that balance and that tension needs to be struck in the believer's life. Now, verse 53, it came to pass when Jesus had finished these parables that he departed from there. And when he had come to his own country, he's going back to Nazareth, he taught them in their synagogue, so that they were astonished and said, where did this man get this wisdom? And look, these mighty works. So he's spending some time there in Nazareth. It seems at least a couple Saturdays. And he's teaching there. And the people that are familiar with him see him as somebody novel. They see him as somebody different. They're kind of amazed by him. And they're amazed both by his words, his wisdom, and his actions. Now, just take notice. It says down in verse 58 that he did not do many mighty works there. People want to say, well, they didn't have any belief, so he couldn't do any mighty works there. That's not what it says. Right? Here in Nazareth, he is teaching and he's doing miracles, which is what Jesus does. Money's allowed to have free reign in a certain place. He teaches and does miracles. He teaches and then backs up his teaching with his own life. This is what Jesus does. He almost can't help but do it. Wisdom and mighty works. Now, the people that were there, that are familiar with him, had seen him grow up in this town, that knew his family, they say in verse 55, is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Verse 56, and his sisters, are they not all with us? Where then did this man get all these things? Now, Jesus will say here in verse 57, I'll read it, they were offended at him, but Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor, except in his own country and in his own house. Now, Jesus recognizes that the reason why they can't accept him is because they're too familiar with him. But they're too familiar with him in the wrong ways. They're measuring him based on the flesh. They're measuring him based on his natural heritage. They're measuring him based on his family. And remarkably, it's interesting, they're actually measuring Jesus based on people who don't even believe in Jesus. They had come in chapter 12 trying to get Jesus out of the ministry. They are thinking that Jesus is going crazy. You're claiming this, teaching this. There's no way. You got to get out of here. They've tried to stop the ministry. They tried to shut it down. Here, other people are looking at his family members and saying, like, we know them, we understand them quite well. But here's Jesus. We don't get this. This is just can't. This does not fit. And it becomes imperative, I think, for all of us that we be very careful that we don't measure Jesus based on the wrong measurings. That we don't measure Jesus based on the wrong things, and especially the wrong people. Right? You'll hear it all the time. Invite people to church. You'll hear it all the time. I don't go to church. There are hypocrites there. Like, that is literally one of the dumbest arguments I've ever heard in my entire life. Now, depending on how well I know the person, that's what I'll say. What are you talking about? That's dumb. What do you mean it's dumb? I said there are hypocrites everywhere. You want to avoid, you got to get out of America. You're going to have to go somewhere else. Right? There are hypocrites everywhere. What are you talking about? I don't go there. There are hypocrites there. You go to a bar? No hypocrites at the bar. Sure, they're all perfect. What are you talking about? There are hypocrites everywhere. And frankly, in what other area of our lives do we evaluate the claims of the true based on the minority that don't even believe in the claims of the true? Why are you looking at hypocrites? Why do you care so much about hypocrites? Why do you care so much about the person that says they claim to be a Christian and then why is that a fixation? Why do you even care? Unless you need some ammunition to back up your own ungodly behavior. Some excuse you want to use to not do what you know you need to do. What does that matter to me? Somebody wants to claim Christ and live in an ungodly manner? Oh, sure, it hurts. Sure, I wish everybody who named the name of Jesus walked perfectly. There was never any backsliding or never ever any apostasy. I would wish that. But that's not life. That's not what we're told in these parables. It's not 100%. Not everybody in these groups are going to get all in. There are tares among the wheat. There are wicked among the good in the dragnet. That's the way this goes. There's leaven in the flour. There are birds in the mustard tree. That's the way this goes. The question for all of us is not, can I point out somebody who's not doing this the way they claim to have done it, or is not doing this the way I think they ought to do this? That's not the question. The question is, what did Jesus do there? What did Jesus do there? Don't evaluate this based on tares. Don't even evaluate it based on wheat. The farmer's the farmer. Evaluate his field based on the farmer. And what did Jesus ever do wrong? I love when you get to the end of the Gospels, every one of them, but I think Luke does it the most. Where over and over and over again it says, we find no fault in this man. We find no fault in this man. Now listen, when we get somebody that runs for office in our country, you know right ahead of time that there are people scouring that person's life to find every misstep, everything they did wrong, to use against them in any type of political campaign. How thoroughly do you think they scoured the life of Jesus to find one fault in his life? It had to have been quite thorough, because the accusations they make are things that people assumed about Jesus. Those accusations weren't even true. You're born of fornication. They thought Jesus was born illegitimately. And they want to throw that in Jesus' face. They just didn't even realize he wasn't born illegitimately. It just Joseph wasn't the dad. They just didn't want to accept the other option. They scoured his life with a fine-tooth comb. They tried to point out anything, right? He kicked a dog when he was 2. He bit his mom when he was breastfeeding, right? They would have come up with anything. Now, I'm not sure Mary would have ever told that, right? He would have come up with anything. Yes, his nature. He was a bit selfish when he was 3, and then 4, and then 5. And then 17 and 18 and 19, and maybe end up growing out of it in his 20s, right? He had this little Amish, kind of thing, where he just went and rebelled against his family for a couple years, and then eventually came back, right? He had this mean streak with his brothers and sisters who are kind of always getting anything. Listen, would you want somebody to go through your life with a fine-tooth comb? Flash up on the screen all of these pictures and stories, things that you did, places you've been. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Well, they could go through Jesus' life with a fine-tooth comb and find nothing at all. I find no fault in this man. Nothing to accuse him of. It says here in verse 57 that they were offended at him. They were scandalized, literally. There's a scandal. It's something they weren't expecting. Because it was hard for them to understand how somebody so perfect, or somebody who claimed to be so perfect, could be so misrepresented by the people who were actually the closest to him. We know Mary and Joseph. We know the brothers. We know the sisters. They're obviously not receiving him. They don't listen to anything he says. They don't believe in what he's teaching. How could this one actually claim all this stuff and then not even get that support, that acceptance, that belief? And they're all bothered by it. So much so that it says in verse 58 that he did not do, many mighty works. Any mighty works is more than any mighty works that I could do. Like, he did one mighty work, that's one more than Mike Ogler could do. Okay? So if he did any mighty works, we're celebrating the any mighty works. He just didn't do many mighty works there. And he didn't do it because of their unbelief. Now, their unbelief didn't limit his actions. What it did is it prevented him from casting his pearls before swine. God can do whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. He's not dependent on our faith to do it. He can do whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it, and he does. Now, obviously, if he wants us working together with him in that, he wants us to believe and work in fellowship with him in that regard, then we get the blessing of working with Jesus by trusting him as he's doing what he said he's going to do. But it's not dependent on us. So much of the faith confession healers, the faith teacher healers, they put all this pressure on us. You have to believe the right way. You have to say the right prayer. You got to do the right things. And then if you do, then all of a sudden, like the puzzle pieces all align, and then you'll get, kind of the door will open up, and you'll get your treasure, or something. You'll get your healing, you'll get your blessing, you'll get your husband, you'll get your, you just got to do all of this the right way. When that's not how this works. Again, we're not the initiators. We're the responders. He can do whatever he wants to do. The question is, are we going to accept him when he does it? The primary question in all of this is, what are we doing with the landowner? What are we doing with the man who bought the treasure? What are we doing with the individual, the merchant who bought the beautiful pearl? What are we doing with him? What are we doing with Jesus? That's the question. And it seems so basic and elementary in some ways that I feel almost silly to even have to say it. Except I know my own life and the busyness and the activity and the stuff of it. Where it becomes hard sometimes to even just, did I get 30 minutes to sit down with me and Jesus today? Did I get a chance to see his face? Did I hear his voice? Did I know his touch? Am I so busy doing things for Jesus that I'm not actually with Jesus? Just running around like a crazy person, trying to do all this great stuff for God, which is really nonsense, because none of us do great stuff. He does the great stuff, but he can do it with us or without us. Much better if he just did it through us. But the question by and large for us is like, how are we spending time with Jesus? Are we knowing him? Are we evaluating our lives on him? Are we being connected to him? Are we in fellowship with him? Do we know his touch? Do you know his presence? Do you know his love? And do you know how much he values you? If not, you just need to spend some more time with him. And you need to know that you're accepted, that you're loved, you're purchased. Be willing to receive you, no matter where you are, what you've done, what your past is, right? How meaningless, old, or frail you feel yourself to be, he would receive you because he already purchased you. And the question for us is just, are we going to accept that? Will we let that be our reality and our truth as well? Right? I don't know where you stand. I don't know. But my encouragement to you guys would be, it feels like we're starting a new year, even though we started a new year a couple weeks ago, but just like this is the baseline for everything. Spending some time with Jesus and getting to know him and relating to him personally. Some of us got to just shut the news off. Get off social media. Stop listening to nobody that knows nothing about everything but saying everything, right? I promise you, nobody in central Pennsylvania knows how to run the government of the United States of America or the world. We don't know. Knock it off. It doesn't matter, right? Love Jesus. Walk with Jesus. Spend time with Jesus, right? And then do as you're led. Right? In some ways, not that complicated. But then why is it so hard? Why don't we do it more?
We learn that familiarity can be dangerous. It can blind us to what's right in front of us. The people of Nazareth couldn't see who Jesus truly was because they measured him by the wrong standard, by what they thought they already knew. And it's a good reminder for us too. We can't measure Jesus by the opinions of others or by our own limited understanding. We must let him reveal himself for who he really is. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for joining us. This is the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.